Imagine this. You are a modern person, born and raised in a world of comfort. Your biggest challenge today is deciding what to order for dinner or meeting a deadline at work. But what if you had to face the real, primitive world? A world without electricity, running water, smartphones, and where even the simplest food doesn't magically appear in your fridge. A world where every day is a struggle for survival and every minute is a test of strength. The Stone Age, a time when our ancestors lived in complete harmony with nature, relying solely on their skills, instincts, and knowledge. We are used to thinking of them as primitive people, but is that really the case? Would you try to live there for even one day? I doubt it. Today we'll figure out why you wouldn't last a day in the Stone Age. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how even the simplest object in modern life is a technological marvel created by thousands of years of evolution. In the Stone Age, navigation was not just a skill, but a deep, instinctive knowledge absorbed from an early age. To find their way home, to a source of water, or to a hunting ground, people relied solely on their memory and natural landmarks. Every member of the tribe knew their territory as if it were part of their own being. They had to memorize the location of every significant tree, every rock, the shape of the hills, and the curves of the rivers. And this was not just memory, it was reading the landscape, the ability to understand its signals. For primitive man, the sky was a living map. He could determine the time of day by the position of the sun, and at night by the constellations. The North Star always pointed north, and its position could be used not only to determine the cardinal directions, but also to calculate the time approximately. Observing the heavenly bodies was a daily practice on which life depended. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, becoming part of culture and survival. Reading the land was another art. A hunter could determine not only the type of animal from its tracks, but also its weight, speed, and even the direction it was moving in. He knew that a bent branch or knocked down moss could be signs left by fellow hunters. By looking at the terrain, he could confidently say where to find a source of water, where to find shelter from the weather, and where to find a safe place to spend the night. For example, streams often flowed down slopes, collecting water from the surrounding hills, and gentle slopes were a sign of more fertile soil where edible plants could be found. They understood how to use the shadows cast by trees and rocks to determine the time of day and plan their movements. They knew that shadows were longest in the morning and evening and shortest at noon. This allowed them to calculate how much time they had left before dark and when to return to their dwellings. Orientation by the wind was also part of their navigation system. They could sense where the wind was blowing from and use it to avoid scaring away prey while hunting, or conversely, to prevent predators from smelling them. Every sound and every movement in the forest carried information. The rustling of leaves, the cries of birds, the crackling of branches, all these were signals that primitive man knew how to decipher. Modern man hears only noise, but primitive man hears history. The history of where prey can be found, where danger lurks, and where fellow tribesmen can be found. Their knowledge was not limited to their immediate surroundings. They were true botanists and zoologists, instinctively understanding which plants were edible and which were poisonous. One wrong decision could cost them their lives, so this knowledge was embedded in their collective memory. They could tell the difference between edible roots, berries, and mushrooms, knew when and where to gather them, and how to prepare them properly. Knowledge of animals was no less important. They could determine the approach of a predator by the behavior of a flock of birds and the time of year by the migration of herds. They knew which animals were nocturnal and which were diurnal, and how to predict the weather based on their habits. Knowledge of materials was also critical for primitive people. They knew how to recognize suitable stones for making tools, knowing that flint produces a sharp edge, while softer rocks are suitable for grinding. They knew how to use animal skins for clothing and shelter, which bones were best for spearheads and which for needles. Even choosing wood for a fire was an art. Some types burned slowly and gave off a lot of heat, while others burned quickly and produced a lot of smoke. Their medical knowledge was primitive but vital. They knew about the healing properties of certain herbs and plants that could be used to stop bleeding, treat wounds, or relieve pain. Passing this knowledge from elders to younger members of the tribe was essential for survival. Every scar, every story of survival became a lesson for future generations. Without these skills, a Stone Age man would have been doomed. Getting lost in the forest meant certain death. He would not have been able to find food, water, or shelter. He would not have been able to return to his community. Everything we take for granted today was the result of constant observation and a deep understanding of the world. It wasn't just knowledge, it was part of their instinct woven into their DNA. Think about it. What do you think is the most obscure knowledge of primitive man that would help you survive? Write about it in the comments. To prepare food, it was necessary not only to obtain it, but also to know how to make it safe and nutritious. Modern methods of heat treatment, frying, boiling, baking, were a real art for primitive man, requiring deep knowledge and practice. He knew how to properly cut up a carcass, how to separate edible parts from inedible ones, which roots could be eaten raw, and which needed to be cooked. Fire was not just a source of heat, but a tool that made food safe. It killed bacteria and parasites, made meat softer, and plants more nutritious. Modern people do not know this. You would try to eat raw meat, risking serious poisoning, or cook edible plants without knowing how to prepare them properly. In the Stone Age, every piece of food obtained was the result of enormous effort and collective labor. Cutting up a large animal required sharp stone tools and knowledge of anatomy. Hunters and gatherers knew exactly where to find the most valuable parts: fat, internal organs, bone marrow, sources of calories without which survival was unthinkable. They did not waste energy on useless parts, but focused on the most nutritious. It was not just food, but fuel for the body, allowing it to function in harsh conditions. They were masters of food preservation. In the absence of refrigerators, they developed methods that allowed food to be stored for long periods of time. They dried meat in the sun and smoked it over a fire to prevent it from spoiling. They knew how to make pemmican, a nutritious mixture of dried and ground meat mixed with melted fat. This food was light, easy to carry, and high in calories, which was critical for long journeys. In addition to meat, their diet consisted of roots, berries, and nuts. They were natural botanists, able to distinguish edible plants from poisonous ones, and knew where and at what time of year to find food. Some roots and tubers required special preparation, such as soaking or boiling, to remove poisonous substances. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, becoming part of their survival culture. Modern people faced with this situation would be at a loss. You don't know how to obtain food, how to prepare it, or how to preserve it. You don't know how to use fire not only for warmth, but also as a tool for cooking. Your food-related skills are limited to opening packages and using kitchen utensils. In the Stone Age, this would be equivalent to a death sentence. You would not be able to survive even a single day because you would not know how to obtain the most basic thing for life: food. In primitive communities, the question of food distribution was not just ethical, but vital. Hunger was a constant threat, and any wrong decision could lead to the death of the entire tribe. Hunting, especially large game, was the result of the efforts of the entire group. Some tracked the animal, some drove it into a trap, and some delivered the final blow. Men, women, and even children participated in this process, distracting the prey or helping to gather plant food. Therefore, the logic of collective labor led to collective consumption. Refusal to share food with a fellow tribesman was tantamount to a death sentence, which contradicted the very essence of survival. The tribe was a single organism, where everyone performed their own function. Someone who couldn't go hunting today because of illness or injury could become an essential member of the community tomorrow, like an experienced toolmaker or a herbalist. So sharing resources wasn't an act of kindness, but a smart way to protect the future. This principle of mutual assistance strengthened social ties and ensured stability in conditions of constant danger. Even the strongest hunters could not survive alone. They needed their fellow tribesmen to protect them from predators, to hunt large animals together, and to care for children and the sick. Therefore, the distribution of food was the basis of their social structure. It created a system of interdependence where every member of the community felt protected and needed. This system was much more effective than individual survival. But think about it. If every edible fruit and every piece of game killed was the result of collective labor, would you share your spoils with those who did not participate in the hunt? How did primitive people answer this question? We will tell you more later. In the Stone Age, survival was a collective project. The community was a single organism where everyone played their part and worked together for the good of the whole group. It wasn't a matter of choice, it was a matter of survival. One person couldn't hunt large animals, build a sturdy shelter, or keep a fire going all the time. These tasks required coordinated teamwork. The community was built on strict but unwritten rules. There was a division of labor. There were those who specialized in making tools, craftsmen who knew how to work flint to create a sharp knife or spear tip. There were hunters whose job was to track prey and coordinate collective hunts. There were gatherers who had a deep knowledge of plants and their properties. These people knew where and when to look for food, how to distinguish edible berries from poisonous ones, and which roots could be used for healing or cooking. Interaction within the community was based on trust and a clear understanding of social roles. Communication was not only verbal. Facial expressions, gestures, and intonations were all extremely important. Without knowledge of these subtleties, you would not even be able to convey a simple message, let alone earn trust. You would be a stranger, incomprehensible, and potentially dangerous. Your clumsiness in communication and ignorance of their rules and rituals would make you an outcast. Loneliness in the Stone Age was equivalent to a death sentence. Without a community, you could not count on protection from predators that could attack at any moment. Without the help of others, you would not be able to build a shelter to protect you from the cold and rain. You couldn't even build and maintain a fire. This required constant monitoring, which was an impossible task for one person. The community was a repository of knowledge. It was there that all survival skills were passed down, from hunting techniques to herbal remedies. Exclusion from the community meant losing access to this invaluable information. You wouldn't know how to find food, how to process animal skins for clothing, how to make rope, or how to sharpen a stone. All this knowledge was part of the collective memory, and only as a member of the community could you access it. Your entire life in the modern world is built on individual achievements. You are used to thinking of yourself as a separate entity, but in the Stone Age, such an approach would have been suicidal. The community was your home, your protection, your only chance of survival. Without it, you would not have lasted a single day. The community not only passed on practical skills, but also shaped culture. Shared rituals, songs, dances, and rock paintings were not just entertainment, but a way to bring the community together and pass on knowledge. Through them, primitive people expressed their fears and hopes, explained incomprehensible natural phenomena, and shared life experiences. Rock paintings, for example, were not just art, but a kind of textbook depicting hunting techniques, animal species, and important events. Beliefs and myths were another powerful tool for social cohesion. Primitive people deified the forces of nature, the sun, the moon, animals, and trees. These beliefs created a common worldview, gave meaning to their existence, and helped them cope with their fears. Rituals associated with hunting or harvesting not only strengthened belief in success, but also reminded each member of the community of their role and responsibilities. Thus, the Stone Age community was not just a group of people, but a complex social structure where practical skills and cultural traditions were inextricably linked. Survival was only possible as a collective, and each member was an integral part of this mechanism. Individualism, which is so valued in the modern world, would have been fatal at that time. It would have destroyed the collective and, consequently, deprived every member of the community of a chance to survive. It was in the community, in these close social ties, that the first forms of ethics and morality emerged. Concepts of justice, mutual aid, and responsibility were formed out of the need to survive. Primitive people knew that their fate was inextricably linked to that of their fellow tribesmen, and this was the most important lesson we can learn from their experience. You are used to being able to sleep peacefully in your bed, knowing that you are safe. In the Stone Age, there was no such comfort. Every night was a test. You had to sleep on the hard ground, constantly listening for sounds that could mean danger. You did not know how to choose the right place to spend the night to be safe. You didn't know how to build a fire that would burn all night and scare away predators. Sleep was short and shallow because you had to be ready for danger at any moment. Lack of normal sleep could lead to loss of concentration, which would be very dangerous. Primitive man was not just afraid of the dark. He understood its language. The rustling of leaves, the crackling of branches, distant howls. All these sounds were information. He instinctively knew that a place to spend the night should be chosen on high ground so that he could see the surroundings, or in a shallow cave to protect himself from the wind. A campfire was not only a source of heat, but also the only reliable shield. Keeping the fire going all night was an important task that was performed in turns. It was one of the most important tasks because without fire, the night turned into a deadly trap. Lack of sleep was not a problem. It was the norm. Primitive people were masters of night vigilance. Their hearing and sense of smell were sharpened to the limit. They could distinguish between an animal coming to a watering hole and a predator stalking its prey by the sound it made. They knew that the cry of a certain bird or sudden silence could be a signal of danger. This ability to read the night world was not innate, but developed and vitally necessary. The ability to sense danger approaching, which literally hung in the air, was the key to survival. Sleep was a collective act. The community slept together to ensure everyone's safety. Strong, experienced hunters positioned themselves closer to the outer perimeter, ready to repel an attack at any moment. Keeping the fire going was everyone's job. Designated members of the group took turns making sure the fire didn't go out by throwing wood on it. In the darkness, by the light of the fire, they felt safe, and this feeling was their only protection. The sleeping place was chosen wisely. It had to be sheltered from the wind but still offer a good view. Every cave, every rock shelter, every clearing was assessed for safety. They knew that animals avoided open areas and preferred shelter. Therefore, they tried to choose a place where it would be difficult for a predator to approach unnoticed. For Stone Age people, sleep was not rest in the modern sense. It was a state of heightened alertness when the conscious and subconscious minds worked together to ensure safety. Any movement or sound could bring them out of this state. Modern humans are not capable of this. Your body is accustomed to comfort and safety, and you would not be able to fall asleep in such conditions. Your mind would be overwhelmed with fear and anxiety, leading to loss of concentration, fatigue, and ultimately a fatal mistake. And even if you were lucky enough to wake up, how would you pay for your place by the fire? After all, in the Stone Age, you had to bargain for warmth and safety. Keep watching the video to find out the answer to this question. In the Stone Age, money was meaningless. The economy was based on barter and exchange, but it wasn't just trade. It was a complex system of interdependence. To get something, you had to offer something in return. You don't know how to make tools, hunt, or gather plants, so you have nothing to offer the community. You don't know how to negotiate or determine the value of an item. You don't know how to build relationships with people who can give you what you need. Value in this world was not determined by abstract concepts, but by practical necessity. A well-made stone tool was valuable because it could help with hunting and therefore provided food. Knowing where to find edible plants or medicinal herbs was invaluable, as it ensured the survival and health of the entire group. Reputation and skill were the main currency. A craftsman who could carve the perfect spearhead was respected and could count on a share of the spoils. An experienced hunter always got the best cuts of meat. Exchange was not just a transaction, but a social ritual. It strengthened bonds within the community and created a network of mutual obligations. If you helped someone today, you could count on help tomorrow. It was an unspoken credit system based on trust. To enter it, you had to prove your usefulness, show that you were not a burden, but a valuable member of the community. Modern people, deprived of these skills, are worthless in this system. You cannot hunt, you cannot make tools, you do not know how to find food. Not only can you not offer anything in return, but you also become a consumer of the community's resources without giving anything in return. Such a state of affairs would have been unthinkable in the Stone Age. Every person had to contribute to the survival of the group. Failure to do so meant isolation and starvation. Every object, every piece of food had a history. You knew who made that spear, who hunted that meat, who found those berries. That history was part of the object's value. You didn't just take something, you accepted the labor and effort of another person. It was an economy built on respect and recognition of everyone's contribution. For modern people, accustomed to anonymous transactions and abstract money, this system would be not only incomprehensible, but hostile. You would not be able to negotiate, exchange, or, most importantly, earn the trust without which it was impossible to obtain food, shelter, or even a place by the fire. You are used to being able to earn money sitting at a computer or doing simple work. In the Stone Age, labor was physical and hard. To get food for one day, you had to expend a huge amount of energy. You are used to being able to rest after work, but for primitive man, labor was continuous. You had to hunt, gather plants, build shelters, and make tools. All these tasks required physical strength and endurance that you are not used to. Which do you think was more difficult? Physical labor or intellectual labor? Primitive man could not distinguish between these concepts. His physical labor was always closely linked to intellectual labor. To hunt, you not only needed strength, but also knowledge of animal habits, an understanding of how to read tracks, and how to use the terrain. To make a tool, you had to not only strike stone against stone, but also know the properties of different rocks and understand which stone was best suited for a knife and which for an axe. Their bodies were forged by nature. Every step across rough terrain, every heavy log carried to build a shelter, every long hunt, all of this was part of their daily life. They possessed incredible endurance that modern humans are not accustomed to. Our lifestyle, with its sedentary work and comfort, has made our bodies incapable of such exertion. It would take you several days just to get used to that level of physical activity, and by that time, you would not have survived. In the Stone Age, work efficiency was measured not in money but in survival. If you spent a whole day hunting and came back empty-handed, it was a day wasted. If you spent several days making a spear, but it broke on the first use, it was a huge waste of time and energy. Every mistake came at a high price. This forced them to be incredibly careful and attentive to their work. Work was continuous. Even after a successful hunt, when there was plenty of food, the work did not stop. The carcass had to be cut up, the meat preserved, the skin processed, the tools repaired, and firewood prepared. All of this required strength and time. Rest was only possible when all these tasks were completed. And even then, they might engage in basket weaving or making jewelry, which also had value. For primitive man, there was no division between work and rest in the modern sense. Life was one big cycle of labor, where every minute counted. Modern people, with their need for rest and entertainment, would not be ready for such a regime. You would quickly become exhausted and lose concentration, which in the Stone Age would have been deadly. But even if you agreed to this hard work, how would you look for a job? After all, there was no LinkedIn or resumes in the Stone Age. Keep watching the video. We'll talk about that now. In the Stone Age, knowledge was not abstract. It was part of life, woven into every step, every movement. Primitive man did not learn from books, but gained knowledge directly from the world around him and from his fellow tribesmen. This process began at an early age and continued into old age. Observation, imitation, and constant practice were the three pillars of their education. Any skill that seems primitive to us today was the pinnacle of technology for them. Take fire, for example. Striking it with friction is not just a mechanical action. It is an art that requires knowledge of the properties of different types of wood, the ability to choose the right tinder, and patience. First, you need to find and prepare suitable wood, then gather dry, flammable material. Only then, using the right technique, could you get the coveted spark. This knowledge was as valuable as knowledge of programming is today. Similarly, making rope was not a simple matter of weaving. Primitive man knew that to make a strong rope, he had to use fibers from certain plants, such as nettles or wild hemp. They knew how to process these fibers, make them soft and pliable, and then weave them correctly so that the rope could withstand heavy loads. This skill was indispensable in building dwellings, making fishing nets, or carrying heavy objects. Life in the Stone Age required a deep understanding of the environment. They were natural botanists and zoologists. They knew which plants were edible and which were not, which berries could be eaten, and which would cause poisoning. They understood the habits of animals, knew where to find them, and how to hunt them. This knowledge was not just information, but instructions for survival. The slightest mistake in identification could lead to starvation or disease. Toolmaking is a science in itself. Primitive people knew that flint was needed to make a sharp knife, and a harder rock was needed for an axe. They knew how to split stone, shaping it into the desired form and sharpness. This skill required not only strength, but also an understanding of the physical properties of the material. They could create tools that were effective for their purpose and reliable in use. This knowledge was not something that could be mastered in a day. It was the result of years of practice and constant learning. Modern man, with his abstract thinking and dependence on technology, would not be able to master these skills in a short period of time. You know you need fire, but you don't know how to get it. You know you need a rope, but you don't know how to make one. Your knowledge is information, and their knowledge is action. In the Stone Age, you would have been just a person surrounded by tools and resources, but unable to use them. This lack of practical skills would have made you helpless and doomed to certain death. You are used to safety. You know that if something happens, the police, ambulance, or fire department will come. In the Stone Age, there was no such luxury. Danger lurked at every turn. Wild animals, poisonous plants, harsh weather conditions, hunger, cold. You don't even know how to defend yourself. You don't know how to throw a spear or fight off an animal. You are not used to the fact that every sound and every movement could be a sign of danger. For primitive man, danger was not an event, but a constant state. His senses were sharpened to the limit, and his survival instincts worked continuously. He could hear the slightest rustle in the bushes, determined by smell that a predator was nearby, and read the tracks on the ground to understand who had passed by earlier. This ability to constantly scan their surroundings was not a luxury, but a necessity for survival. They were masters of danger prevention. Protection did not begin at the moment of attack, but was part of their everyday life. Choosing a place to sleep, for example, was a strategic decision. They preferred caves or rock shelters, which provided natural protection from wind and rain. The entrance to their dwellings was always narrow so that it could be easily defended. They knew how to use natural barriers such as rivers or ravines to secure their territory. Fire was their most reliable protector. During the day, it provided warmth and helped to cook food, and at night it became a living shield. The light and crackling of burning logs scared away most predators. Keeping the fire burning throughout the night was a collective task, and no one could afford to fall asleep until they were sure that the fire was burning steadily. The danger did not come only from wild animals. Nature itself was full of threats. A sudden downpour could cause a flood that would destroy their homes. A sharp cold snap could lead to death from hypothermia if there were no warm clothes or fire. Natural disasters such as landslides or falling trees were a constant threat, and they knew how to read the signs that indicated potential danger. Hunger and cold were as dangerous enemies as predators. Going without food for several days could lead to exhaustion, and going without water could lead to rapid death. Therefore, every day was a battle for survival, and every step was aimed at finding resources. Hunting and gathering were not just a way to obtain food, but a way to prevent starvation. For primitive man, fear was not paralyzing. It was a tool that helped him survive. Fear made him cautious, attentive, and prudent. It taught him to act, not hide. Modern humans, faced with such a level of danger, would be overwhelmed by anxiety and panic, leading to a loss of concentration and fatal mistakes. In the Stone Age, there was no such thing as a safe place. Safety was a state of mind and the result of constant work. It was achieved not through technology, but through knowledge, instincts, and collective work. You would not be able to survive there because you do not know how to protect yourself from the dangers that lurk at every turn, and you are not used to your life depending on your ability to be constantly alert. You are used to being able to see a doctor whenever you are sick or injured. In the Stone Age, this was not the case. Our ancestors treated themselves with herbs, but even this was an art form. They knew which plants had healing properties and how to collect and process them correctly. You know nothing about this. The slightest injury, a small cut, a cold, all of this could have serious consequences. Medicine in the Stone Age was a system based on deep empirical knowledge and centuries of experience. It was not just a belief in the power of nature, but a practical understanding of its properties. Every community had a person who possessed this knowledge. A kind of healer who knew which plants could be used for healing, which for pain relief, and which for stopping bleeding. This knowledge was passed down by word of mouth, from generation to generation, and was invaluable for survival. They did not use antiseptics from the pharmacy to treat wounds. They knew that the juice of certain plants had antibacterial properties and could help prevent infection. They could apply crushed leaves to a wound to stop bleeding, or used special herbs to make poultices that helped relieve pain and speed healing. This was not just random use of plants, but precise knowledge of their properties, which was the result of long observation and experimentation. In cases of fractures and dislocations, they knew how to carefully set the bone and immobilize it with a splint made of wood and plant fibers. They had an understanding of anatomy that allowed them to do this as safely as possible. They knew that immobilization was the key to successful healing and followed this principle to give the body a chance to recover. They even treated colds and fevers with plants. They knew which herbs to brew to help lower the temperature and how to prepare decoctions to ease breathing. Their methods were effective and time-tested. This knowledge was part of their culture and survival. For modern people, who are accustomed to sterile conditions and antibiotics, this knowledge would be inaccessible. The slightest cut, which seems insignificant in the modern world, could lead to sepsis and death in the Stone Age. A broken leg, which today is treated in a hospital, could lead to disability without proper treatment, which in a constant struggle for survival was equivalent to a death sentence. The absence of modern medicine means that you would not only be unable to cure your illnesses, but you would also be unable to prevent them. You would not know which water is safe to drink and which could cause serious poisoning. You would not know which foods could cause indigestion and which could cause an allergic reaction. In the Stone Age, health was not a gift, but the result of constant effort and knowledge. Taking care of your health did not begin with a trip to the doctor, but with prevention. They knew how to keep their homes clean, avoid dangerous places where there might be poisonous plants, and eat right to maintain their immunity. All these skills, which were commonplace for them, are terra incognita for you. Thus, even if you manage to avoid being attacked by predators and find food, your body, unadapted to the conditions of the Stone Age, would become your main vulnerability. The slightest illness or injury, which in the modern world can be solved with a couple of pills, would be fatal in the Stone Age. You are used to comfort and safety. You are not ready for a constant struggle for survival. You are not ready for every day to be a new challenge. You are not ready for everything you have to be the result of your own labor and effort. You are not ready to completely change your way of thinking in order to survive. You are not ready for a life where there is no room for weakness. The primitive man's mind was honed for survival. His brain was not a repository for abstract ideas, but a tool for solving immediate, vital problems. They did not think about career advancement, accumulating wealth, or political events. Their thoughts were focused on how to find food today, how to protect themselves from danger, how to stay warm. It was simplicity that gave them strength. Primitive man did not live in the future. His relationship with time was cyclical, not linear. He understood the changing seasons, day and night, but did not make plans for 10 years ahead. This allowed him to concentrate fully on the present moment. When he hunted, he thought only about hunting. When he gathered berries, he thought only about berries. The absence of distractions and constant anxiety about the future gave him incredible concentration, which was the key to survival. The concept of weakness in the Stone Age was different. Weakness is not the absence of emotions, but the inability to act in a critical situation. It is panic that prevents you from making the right decision. It is fear that paralyzes your movements. Primitive man felt fear, but he did not allow it to take control of him. He used it as a signal to act, not as an excuse for inaction. It was emotional endurance that was formed throughout his life. Modern humans, on the other hand, are accustomed to a comfortable life where there is no place for constant struggle. Our brains work with abstract concepts, and we are constantly making long-term plans. We have become accustomed to relying on technology rather than our instincts. In the Stone Age, all these skills would have been useless, and our habits would have been fatal. Your ability to analyze data or plan a budget will not help you when you are facing a predator or trying to start a fire in wet weather. Your biggest obstacle would be your own thinking, your dependence on comfort, your inability to cope with emotional pressure, your habit of routine. All of these would become your Achilles heel. In the Stone Age, you had to be prepared for the unexpected at every moment. You had to be resourceful, cunning, and physically strong. All these qualities were formed over years of constant pressure. Thus, your way of thinking, your lifestyle, and your habits would all be huge barriers to survival. You would not be able to adapt to a life where there is no room for comfort, security, or weakness, and this would be the cause of your demise. The modern world is a world of comfort, safety, and knowledge. We are used to this and take it for granted. But as you can see, even one day in the Stone Age would be an incredible challenge for us. We are not ready for this, either physically or mentally. We have lost the skills that were vital to our ancestors. We have forgotten how to survive in the wild. And this episode is not about how weak we are, but about how far civilization has come. Want to suggest ideas for future episodes? Share your topics in the comments. We'll be sure to use the most interesting ones. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new videos.